Welcome to the Jet Fuel Podcast. I am your host, founder, editor-in-chief of nyjetfuel.com, Matt Barbado. We've got the Jet Fuel three-headed monster in the house today. We've got from College Park, Maryland. I can never remember if it's College Station or College Park, but I'm pretty sure College Station is Texas A&M. We've got two guys live from College Park, Maryland here in Adam Zalonka and Max Marcilla. Be sure to follow them on Twitter. You can follow Max at mmarcilla98. You can follow Adam at Adam_Zalonka. And follow the site at New York Jet Fuel. We want to thank you, as always, for tuning into the Jet Fuel Podcast, where today we will discuss New York's 45-20 loss to the Oakland Raiders. But believe it or not, and if you didn't watch the entire game, or maybe you're just catching up, you watched the highlights, you watched it on DVR, didn't get to see the whole thing, this was a game for almost an entire half. The Jets were down 14-10 with 2 minutes roughly in the second quarter. They were putting up a decent fight against the Raiders team, who some think are Super Bowl contenders. And then the former Jet, Khalif Raymond, who was actually cut this week, he botched. This was a problem he had against the Bills too. Botched a punt return. Set up the Raiders with wonderful field position, and they were able to convert to take a 21-10 lead to head into the half, and the rest is history. The Raiders outscored the Jets 31-10 in the final, 32 minutes or so of game action. So, Adam, I will ask you this to begin the show. If Khalif Raymond doesn't fumble, let's have a little revisionist history here. If Khalif Raymond doesn't fumble, how much of a chance would the Jets have had at winning this game and pulling a massive upset?
Well, I think it can't be very high. It would be higher, but I can't think it would be very high necessarily. I think 20% at max. I'm gonna say like 18%. Just because they were in it pretty close, and the reason they lost was not only that Raymond's muff, which was his third over 2 games, and I yelled about this a week ago, and here we are again. He's not even a Jet anymore. Just because that muff set the Raiders up in very good field position and in a position to score some points, and it was the little rock that got moved that started an avalanche in the second quarter. Mistakes happened more frequently, and it just seems like mistakes can beget mistakes sometimes. So it's not very high because the Raiders are still a far better team, and there were a lot of mismatches in this matchup. But I'm going to say 18%.
18 is really high, Adam. I mean, it is because, hear me out. The Jets were playing, I wouldn't say their best football. I think we'll see in little spurts they'll play better. But that first half, they played fairly decent football. I mean, they gave up a couple big plays defensively. But offense, they scored on 2 straight possessions, and they had just forced 2 Oakland punts. So they were playing well, and even with that, they were still losing. So they were going to lose regardless. The losing process was just expedited by the fumble. I'm going to say 2% chance they would have won if he didn't fumble. Raiders would have still pulled away in the second half, and maybe it wouldn't have been as ugly. But here's the thing, and look, we talked about it. Fumbled twice. We all saw it coming, and unfortunately for Raymond and the Jets, it just happened at the worst time. So it's not a surprise, but it also really it changed the course of the game. But also, the Raiders probably would have ended up winning anyway.
I think it's more discouraging for the Raiders than optimistic for the Jets that they were able to hang around for that long. I mean, the Raiders really should have been they jumped out to a 14-0 lead. And then they let the Jets sort of get back into it. They sort of let off the accelerator a little bit until they got that break from Raymond. It just amazes me how the Jets cannot seem to find a punter who can even, field punts, or a punt returner, who can even field punts. It's remarkable to me how, awful this team has been in special teams. I mean, from top to bottom. I mean, they had Nick Folk as a decent kicker. Locke Edwards is okay as a punter. But they've been going through punters left and right the last few years. It's just amazing to me how, I guess maybe it's emblematic of just the lack of continuity with the franchise. I mean, if you can't find decent special teams players, then maybe that speaks volumes of your player development and your front office And I've been piling on Mike McGagnon a lot this year already, but just another example of how amazing it is how the Jets just cannot find even a punt returner. It's astounding to me, and it's a good thing Raymond got cut because he was a bad returner even when he was fielding kicks. So I don't really know what the Jets saw in him. I'm guessing when Jalen Marshall returns from his 4-game suspension, he still has 2 more games to serve. I'm guessing once he finishes serving that, he will reassume the duties, and then he'll start fumbling. So,
yeah,
kind of a mess all around at punt returner.
I'm going to be a little optimistic real quick for probably the last time in this show. I think the Jets' special teams outside of returning has been good, actually. You may even argue it's been the best unit. I mean, Catanzaro has made all 4 of his field goals, and the kick coverage was good. I mean, Brent Boyer, the special teams coordinator, called Cordero Patterson the best returner in the game, and there were a couple times where he didn't even get out to the 20. So that's about it for my optimistic, spiel. But I mean, that's good, right? It's worth something.
I just don't find it very hard to cover kicks anymore in the NFL because you're kicking from the 35-yard line. So as long as you've got a guy with a good leg, and now the strategy is not even to kick touchbacks, it's to kick it to the 10-yard line roughly and let your coverage unit get down there as fast as they can, and it gives the return man less room to operate. So they start behind the. So I just don't think returning kickoffs is. I think it's almost impossible in today's NFL because they sort of want to eliminate the play without eliminating it. But I see what you're saying, Max.
Look, I'm just trying to find some form of optimism.
It makes the Jets defense actually look worse because then that means that teams are driving down the field further and longer to score touchdowns on them. So let's talk about a unit that I think would be more disappointing than Khalif Raymond would be. Let's talk about the defensive line. 0 sacks, a big squadouche, as Tony Kornheiser, I think, would say on PTI, or maybe it was Tony Reale on Around the Horn. I'm not sure who, but a big squadouche in the sack department for the Jets. No quarterback takedowns of Derek Carr. They have 2 on the season now. They only got to Tyrod Taylor twice. And this is supposed to be the unit that many believe is the most talented on the team with Mo Wilkerson, Leonard Williams. I know Pro Football Focus favored Wilkerson's play on Sunday, but would you say that through the first 2 games, Max, this has been the most disappointing unit on the entire team, the defensive line?
I would say so. I mean, look at the numbers, and I know the numbers don't tell the whole story, but they are dead last in the NFL in run defense. And even this past Sunday against the Raiders, Derek Carr, he had 28 dropbacks. He faced pressure on 4 of them. The least pressured quarterback in week 2 per Pro Football Focus. And I mean, look, you can argue the rushing stats don't tell the whole story because LaShawn McCoy and he did a good job he was shifty enough to get out to the second level and a lot of missed tackles from that linebacking. Look, say what you want. The numbers don't tell the whole story, but they tell enough. The Jets aren't getting any pressure, neither from their edge rushers nor their defensive line, and they're not stopping the run. I mean, those are the 2 main jobs of the front 7, and they're just not doing a good job. I think it has been the most disappointing unit, and I think they've had their moments. I think Leonard Williams he got into backfield maybe once or twice, and he made a couple nice plays, and Wilkerson got into backfield once, I remember, and he wasn't terrible. Wilkerson had 2 of the Jets' 4 pressures, and but look, I mean, considering the expectations of this unit, I think you can say it's been the most disappointing.
Yeah, can I jump in here?
Yeah.
No.
Please? Why would you have me on your podcast?
No.
Max,
we got to move on. Okay, here we go. No, go ahead, Adam. I know you wrote a story on this regarding.
Yeah, first of all,
Max, new low for the defense.
Max started to take a little bit of my thunder. I was ready to throw out all the stats in my column, which I highly recommend you read, and hopefully you both highly recommend that people read because it's a little biased.
Oh, Adam, we gotta go. Thanks for your time. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
I'm going to talk over Matthew, and I'm going to keep calling him Matthew whenever I get frustrated with him on a podcast. But listen, it's called New York Jets Defense Reaches New Low in the Todd Bowles Era. And before I forget, I just want to say I agree a large extent with what Max was just saying about the defensive line. If your assessment of the good parts of your defenses. I remember Mo Wilkerson got into the backfield at one point. Like, Mo Wilkerson is being paid as high as anybody on this team. They're supposed to be a superstar defensive lineman, and Leonard Williams is supposed to be this rising star as well, and they're not playing like it. But it's not just them, it's the entire unit. So I will expand this now in my time to the entire defense and the people who coach those defensive players. My article, when we shared it across Facebook, has gotten as much of a reaction as I remember in a long time on something I've written for Jet Fuel. A lot of people are in agreement here that it's not just the players, because the defensive players on paper look a lot better than the offensive players do on paper, right? But can you either of you tell me what defensive coordinator, I'm blanking, Casey Rogers, what Casey Rogers, our Jets defensive coordinator, has done for us lately? Anything?
Nothing. I don't think the unit's gotten any better.
He's been more anonymous than a very quiet head coach in Todd Bowles. And since Max sort of started to throw around some of the stats, like 185 rushing yards per game allowed over 2 games, the point I made in my column is that as bad as the Jets have gotten as of late, the one consistently good thing has always been a top 10 in the league rushing defense. And if that's gone, and I didn't mention this in my article, but David Harris was a big part of that, and everyone wanted to hate on Harris while he was on the team. Well, this is what you get when he's not on the team, folks. So I'm going to conclude my rant by just reading a couple of comments I liked on this Facebook group that we posted the article in. I won't name names. I'll just go first names. David wrote, no fire in the coach equals no fire in the team. We need Bill Coward, and it's spelled C-O-W-A-R-D, which is not how it's actually spelled. Coward.
I'm assuming they get worse.
I don't want to turn this into put a big target on Todd Bowles' back after 2 losses, but I just want to point out that my dad would totally agree with. He's never trusted Todd Bowles because of how seemingly lackadaisical and quiet and not fired up he is. Another person wrote, Bowles is the worst coach in any sport in the history of New York sports, period, stop, 5 exclamation points, and then the worst. So after he said period, stop, he kept going. And that's the hottest take I've ever read. However, Bowles is not really doing anything for his own credibility right now, and Casey Rogers is not. The reason Todd Bowles is on the headline of this article and the photo of this article is that the Jets allowed more points in a single game to Oakland than they've given up to any team during the Todd Bowles era by 11. The previous highest total given up was 34 to these Raiders 2 years ago, and again to the Miami Dolphins during a game last year. 45 blows that out of the water. Terrible. Yeah. The running game has gotten somehow considerably worse, but I don't want everybody to come away from this saying that I'm calling for Todd Bowles' job 2 games into the season, because that's not really what I'm about. But I do want us to consider what this defensive coordinator has actually done for the New York Jets.
Yeah, I don't think the unit's improved. I really don't, and I know that wasn't maybe by design with the way the roster was deconstructed this offseason. I know Jamal Adams and Marcus May are playing well as rookies, and I think the coaches should be given, kudos for that. But, this front 7 as a whole is supposed to be the strength of this team, and why the Jets might, be respectable in some games. And to answer the original question, I say the defensive line has been the most disappointing position on the field this year. Because not only are they, useless in the passing in the pass rushing department, but the 185 yards per game against the run, that can be blamed on the defensive line too, because who's allowing these holes to open up? Clearly the Jets are not following their gap responsibilities, or maybe they are following them and just getting pushed out of the hole. So they've been getting manhandled against the run. It's not allowing the linebackers, who have been bad to begin with, it's not allowing them to do their job and fill the gaps. So it's making things harder on them. Mo Wilkerson, Leonard Williams, Steve McClendon, they're all under fire in my eyes. I'm putting them on blast. They need to be a lot better, or else this team really is going to go 0-16, because this is supposed to be a strength, and so far they've stunk, and it's unacceptable. Especially from a guy like Leonard Williams, who I think a lot of people thought was going to take a big step this year. He's been arguably one of the most disappointing players on the field, in my opinion.
I think they've been okay, and okay is not good.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, especially when you need them to be. I mean, when you have nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys mentioned Adams and May have consistently played good games and have made plays, and you see good things out of them. Other than that, you see average things. You see a nice play by Wilkerson or a nice play by Leonard Williams here or there, but I mean, by and large, the only ones that really play almost every down and do something well are the rookies, and that is a cause for concern. It's not that we didn't expect it to an extent, but once you start getting Wilkerson and Williams, the two supposedly Pro Bowl caliber defensive linemen, once they start falling under that trap, that's when I say it's time for concern. Do I think it's going to last all year? I don't know, but I mean, so far not good.
So let's flip sides of the ball here. Let's talk about a guy who I don't know if I should classify him as a disappointment, or maybe it's a disappointment on our end for how we sort of evaluated him in the preseason. Bilal Powell, once again, not very active. Only played 17 snaps in this game. Matt Forte had 28. Elijah McGuire, the 6th-round rookie out of UL Lafayette, had 12, so he wasn't far behind. Powell finishes the day 6 carries, 13 yards, targeted twice, no receptions. Adam, did we just overestimate what Powell's role is going to be in this offense?
Yes. This one's a pretty simple, short answer. I think we were all wrong because we were hopeful that Powell was going to continue what he was doing in December of 2016, and B, it's just you can never predict this team and these coaches, and they give away very little about what they're planning to do. So we sort of buy into the crowd, the wisdom of the crowd. Everybody said, "Oh, Powell's younger, Powell's less banged up than Matt Forte. Powell looked great in December, so therefore Powell is going to be the featured back, and Forte is going to get fewer carries." And that is just the opposite of what we've seen. Forte is considerably has had more targets and carries through 2 games, and now the emergence of Elijah McGuire, the 6th-round pick, I believe 6th, starting to get handoffs Sunday, like you said. They're just confusing, and we can't predict it. That's all I can say about this one.
But see, here's the thing, and I was wrong to think that Powell would be more productive, but I was also dumb in thinking that he'd be more productive because I knew the Jets weren't going to use him. If you look back at the last 2 years, the Jets, the one big pattern on offense is the Jets don't utilize Bilal Powell until the last month of the season, and then once they start, he tears it up. So look, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that they're not giving him the carries that he deserves. And frankly, I think, again, by the end of the year, he will be the number 1 back, whether it's because Forte is injured or just, wear and tear and they give Powell more reps. I think it's going to be the same as the last 2 years, which is a mistake by the Jets. They should be using him as their primary back, or at least splitting the carries with Forte at the very least. And the Jets aren't doing that. I saw it coming, but I also think I overestimated Powell's skills because of what I would theoretically do as the coach.
Yeah, and clearly what we theoretically would do does not align with what Todd Bowles' staff would theoretically do or has actually done. So maybe we just don't know as much. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying we know as much football as any of those coaches do. We definitely don't. But I don't know. I get Forte's your veteran. He might be the better player of the two. But I don't know. I expected a bigger workload for Powell. I didn't expect McGuire to be in the mix like this. And maybe the injuries in the preseason to Forte and Powell sort of led to this because, McGuire was able to get first-team reps for a good portion of training camp. He started a couple of the preseason games. So maybe that explains it. Maybe the Jets think McGuire is ready. And I'm all for it. I mean, again, this is a youth movement. And Bilal Powell is 29 years old, so it's not like he's a young, spry chicken or anything. But yeah, let's wrap up our week 2 recap with some studs and duds. I will go first. My stud is Elijah McGuire. Unexpectedly, 6 carries, 29 yards, a 4.8 yards per carry average. I'm not saying that's amazing. I'm not saying that's spectacular. I'm saying it's not a bad stat line for a rookie who you didn't really put a lot of draft capital into and might turn out to be a decent player. And, you know, I think there are other answers on this team for studs. Certainly nobody on the defensive side of the ball. I'm gonna be surprised if you guys pick a defensive player. So I'm gonna go with Elijah McGuire as my stud. My dud are the starting inside linebackers. Once again, Darren Lee, Demario Davis, both equally awful. Pro Football Focus graded Lee a 41.3 overall, 46th among inside linebackers. Demario Davis was worse, a 40.2 overall grade. He ranked 50th. The Jets can't stop anybody in the running game. As Adam mentioned, that's something the Jets have been able to hang their hats on for quite a while, even when teams were lousy. So, and I think, you know, obviously I put a lot of heat on the defensive line for this too, but the linebackers need to eventually get into position and make a play, and they just aren't doing that nearly enough.
So I'm going to go with 2 studs. You went with 2 duds. My 2 studs are the 2 rookie safeties, and I have a feeling that we're going to be seeing plenty of games where everything looks awful except these 2 players. And we talked earlier, I think it was you who brought it up, Matt, that if the defensive line doesn't fill their gaps, it causes problems for the linebackers. Well, the one group that does benefit if the front 7 can't bring guys down is the secondary. And there were multiple plays where Adams and May got opportunities to bring down a ball carrier or whomever was in that third tier of the defense, and they were able to bring them down. No missed tackles for either player through 55 snaps. They allowed a combined 1 reception on 55 coverage snaps. I mean, these guys are good. They are very, very good. They play well together. They tackle well. They're clean players. I think it's especially impressive for Adams because he had that one game, I believe it was against the Giants, where he struggled tackling in the preseason, and he has not missed a beat. I think the 2 of them have been great. My dud, well, I could go with the other 51 players on the roster. I'll take out Catanzaro. But my dud is going to be Muhammad Wilkerson because I really thought, and look, there's still a lot of time. I'm not writing him off. But I really thought that his injury last year truly affected him, and it might have. But, you know, now he's supposedly healthy, and he's made a couple plays, got a couple pressures. But, I mean, you look at the way some of these guys, some of these good defensive linemen change games around the NFL. I mean, look at Monday night against the Giants. Granted, it's against Eric Flowers, which isn't, you know, really saying anything. But the way Ziggy Ansah could just change a game, that's the kind of guy that Mo Wilkerson could be. And the fact that the Jets haven't seen it from him in now a little over a year and a couple games, it's frustrating. And I think the Jets will need him to play better. It would really help this rebuilding process. So I'm going to go my dud with Mo Wilkerson.
Well, for me on my end here, I want to say Bilal Powell will be my dud this week. And again, that's through no fault of his own when it's having to do with getting the proper amount of carries and targets. He didn't even catch a pass. He was targeted twice, but didn't even catch a pass. That's also something to consider there. There are good players on this team we haven't talked about in terms of a stud yet, like Jermaine Kearse. He played well, and he scored 2 of the Jets' touchdowns. But I think I want to institute a policy for myself this year in which every week my stud is Lack Edwards. How does that sound?
I mean, hey, he's going to get the reps.
Every week, as long as the Jets keep losing and as long as Edwards keeps punting well, then Lack Edwards will be my stud no matter what. This week, he had just 3 opportunities to punt. Twice he had pins inside the 20. Long of 52. His average is a little deceiving because he was often punting from around, midfield. But his average, even though it was below 40, that doesn't tell the whole story. He's still doing his job, and sometimes, a lot of these guys don't do their jobs 100% of the time. And Edwards, he's good. He's a good punter. We got to look for these silver linings. But as a backup stud to him, I'll say Jermaine Kearse, because we haven't even talked about the fact that he's.
Someone mentioned him.
If Kearse isn't on this team right now, do the Jets score 7 points a game? because I know he didn't score in week 1 for New York, but I don't think he did. If my memory's wrong, correct me. But where else is the offense coming from on this team other than the guy who was a Seahawk 4 weeks ago?
There's nobody in the receiving game.
He's been by far the Jets' best offensive player, and it's not even close.
So there you go. I said dud, and I've got to give you 2 studs, my Edwards and my backup to Edwards.
Yeah, someone had to mention Jermaine Kearse. I think you could even argue Josh McCown, maybe not a stud, but he did have a good game.
You should give him credit, yeah.
He did turn the ball over, I believe, once or twice. Yeah, he had 1 fumble lost. So, he did have the turnover, but, him and Kearse kind of kept the Jets in the game early. So you could argue Josh McCown's a stud. Only 166 yards, though. That's not going to, excite you very much. But, again, he's kind of keeping it clean. He's not killing the Jets. And, coming off of a season where Ryan Fitzpatrick only killed the Jets with self-inflicted wounds, that's an encouraging sign. I guess that's an upgrade. So that's the state of the Jets quarterback position. Not shooting yourself in the foot is a good sign. So that'll end our week 2 recap of an ugly Raiders loss, and we're going to put that in the rearview mirror. We're going to preview week 3, the home opener against the Miami Dolphins. But before we do that, I want to do a little ad read from the New York Jets. If you're looking to go to the home opener, I should say, against the Miami Dolphins this Sunday at MetLife Stadium, or if you're interested in seeing the Jets play the Jacksonville Jaguars or the Atlanta Falcons at home this year, we've got a great promotion for you. Go to nyjetfield.com/tickets. Click on the click here to get your seats link on the flyer, and that'll redirect you to Ticketmaster, where it'll ask you for a promo code. Enter promo code FUEL at the page, and you can get 300 level tickets that start at just $60. 200 level tickets start at $125. That's nyjetfield.com/tickets, promo code FUEL. So we're gonna segue into our Dolphins preview here. The Jets' first divisional matchup of the 2017 season. Dolphins swept the season series last year. The Jets did have a close call in Miami last year, and they ended up losing it. And that sort of played a role in Miami's big winning streak to make the playoffs last year. Miami's a drastically different team with Jay Cutler at the helm, with Ryan Tannehill out. My question to you, Max, to get this started is, outside of Jay Ajayi, their star running back, who is the biggest threat on Miami's offense in your mind?
Well, on the Miami Dolphins, I think I got that right. Outside of Jay Ajayi, let's go with some of the wide receivers, namely Devontae Parker or Jarvis Landry or Kenny Stills. Pick any one of them, because
Matt, how about you pick one, Mr. What have we been calling him?
All right. Devontae Parker. Devontae Parker. We'll go Devontae Parker. But here's the thing, guys. It's not like the Jets' cornerbacks, any of them, have been particularly good. And the thing is, if you were to say the best of the starting bunch, I guess would be Morris Claiborne, because Justin Burris and Buster Skrine have not been good.
Ugh.
So I think you could see some Jarvis Landry in the slot. I think that could make him dangerous. I think you could see Kenny Stills against Justin Burris. That could make him dangerous. But the best wide receiver is Devontae Parker. It's not a cop-out answer. It's a really, really tough matchup for these Jets cornerbacks because they have 3 weapons. They don't have that one superstar per se. It's not like Julio Jones or something. But they have 3 weapons, and the Jets have, quite frankly, 3 weak spots at cornerback. Parker's the best one of them, so I'll say watch out for Parker, but I think Landry in the slot could be a really favorable matchup for Miami.
Do I still have to go?
Yes,
I listed all their weapons, but go ahead.
Matt poses the question, who besides the Dolphins' one good running back on offense should be a threat and you just go with the entire receiver unit.
Hey, you're lucky I didn't throw in the tight end too, because they got a pretty good one.
I'm not picking Julius Thomas with his 26 yards last week. I'm glad you spent most of your time with Devontae Parker, because although I agree with you that he's their most talented receiver, in week 1, Jarvis Landry was their most targeted receiver. 15 targets from Jay Cutler in the Dolphins' first game. If I said week 1 before, I'm sorry about that. It's their first game week 2 since they couldn't play week 1. But in their first game of the year, Landry caught 13 balls and 15 targets. Now, his average was just 6 yards a catch because he only finished with 78 yards. However, like you just pointed out, Cop-Out Marcilla, the Jets' quarterbacks are not particularly world beaters right now. And, if Landry averaged 6 yards a catch last week, he should have no problem doubling that against a guy like Buster Screen. I think Landry, especially from the slot, I don't know who you're going to put on him on the slot. Is it going to be Justin Burris? Is it going to be Marcus Williams? I don't know. So I think Landry might actually have a breakout game, especially if Cutler keeps going to him the way he kept going to him last week against the Chargers.
I think it's going to be Buster Screen in the slot. And when I'm weighing this question, I'm thinking, okay, Devontae Parker is the bigger home run threat. He's the guy who plays on the outside. He's the guy who could kill the Jets down the seam. I don't trust any of New York's cornerbacks to adequately cover maybe Claiborne, but Parker, I think, is a freak in the making, to be honest. I really think – I know he's a big hype-up candidate in fantasy football circles, but, I mean, if you watched him make a couple of those catches against the Chargers last week, he was pretty impressive. Cutler loves throwing to those big, tall guys in the red zone. So, on that side, you have Parker – and then, as Adam just sort of stated, eat up the Jets in the slot. Buster Screen against Jarvis Landry just seems like a mismatch from hell. So I'm going to lean with Jarvis Landry, but I think Miami's passing game could have a really, really good day if Cutler can just keep it together. And that's, a perfect segue to my next topic here.
Just real quick, before you do, Matt, I just wanted to mention, so Pro Football Focus does this really cool thing where they break down the percentage of snaps each wide receiver and cornerback plays on the right, left, and in the slot. And, the numbers from week 2 would indicate the matchups would be Jarvis Landry in the slot against, that would be Buster Screen for the Jets. And then Morris Claiborne, he played on the left 95% of the time. He's not like some of those other cornerbacks that just shadows a receiver. He typically plays on the left side. And the Dolphins employed Kenny Stills on the left, I believe 61. Where is that number? Big chart. It's 35% of the time, 37 for Parker. So I think we could see a mix of Claiborne and Burris on the outside against Parker and Stills, but Landry and Screen, the primary matchup in the slot.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see – I think they're going to make sure to get Parker on probably Burris or whoever lines up on the outside. And not that I even think Claiborne's that much of a threat, but maybe they just say, we'll take our chances and line up. If Claiborne's going to play 95% of the time on the left side, we'll move Parker to the right, and we'll see what our number 2 outside receiver can do against Claiborne. And, this all depends on Jay Cutler, and that's my next question for you guys. Adam, what's your confidence level in against Jay Cutler?
Well, look, we just talked about how the secondary is not so good right now in New York. I mean, here's the thing. The thing I want to add here is I agree with Max a lot about Adams and May. Possibly they're the 2 best players on the defense, which is ridiculous because they're the first and second round draft picks for this year. And Cutler's a vet. He might find a way to beat rookies over the middle and down deep over the middle. But for the most part, I mean, Jamal Adams wasn't even targeted by Derek Carr. I don't know if we talked about that, but I'm pretty sure I read that Derek Carr didn't even target Adams, according to Pro Football Focus. So you keep your passing options, your targets to the outside, sort of medium length. The Dolphins will still carve up the Jets if they keep playing the way they played last week and the week before. Cutler can still carve up the Jets. So I don't have high confidence, but it's not at 0% either, because I think when you talk about the secondary, you got to loop in the good with the bad. You got to loop in what Adams and May are doing down the middle and deep, along with the screens and Marcus Williams and Justin Burris's of the world. Remember, week 2 last year, a whole year ago today, essentially, or a whole year ago last week, it was the safeties who were never getting over to help a one-on-one down the middle for Tyrod Taylor to go beat up on Darrelle Revis with some no-name receiver we can't remember now, right? That's not happening this year. That's one improvement. Adams and May are assuring that that's not happening. So my total, do you want me to put a percent on it as far as confidence? I don't know. It's not high, but it's not nothing.
I mean, I think, and we talked about this offseason, actually, we had a half Dolphins themed podcast about whether they're better with Cutler or Tannehill. And look, that doesn't matter now. What matters most for whichever quarterback was under the center in Miami is the fact that, well, you're playing the Jets secondary. You got a pretty good matchup. I think the key is establishing the run for Miami, because we mentioned earlier the run has not been good. I just think for Jay Cutler, I don't have a ton of confidence in the Jets secondary. I mean, they haven't really shown they're capable of that big game-changing turnover. I mean, they have 1 interception through 2 games, and I think that's been a similar trend we've seen over the last couple of years. Jets secondary has not done a great job of intercepting passes. So I think as long as Jay Cutler just holds on to the ball and doesn't make any dumb mistakes, he'll be fine. I think he can be good against New York secondary. I think anyone can, at least against these cornerbacks, I should say. He might have a bit tougher time hitting Julius Thomas if he's covered by Adams or May, or if there's a 4 wide receiver set. I think the Jets safeties can do a good job, but you look at your guys on the outside and Landry in the slot, if he's up against screen, and as long as Cutler doesn't make that mistake, he's in for a good game.
Yeah, and you never know. You can't say you ever know for sure with Jay Cutler. You just never know what he's going to do. You would think this sets up nicely for him and the Miami Dolphins offense to have a pretty good day, especially the way the Jets have not been able to stop the run at all. My prediction for this game is that the Dolphins will keep it on the ground early and often, and it's not like their defense is going to have to work too hard against the Jets, but especially on the road. Cutler's first game on the road of the season. I think they're going to keep it on the ground, give a steady dose of Ajayi, and I think he's going to run through the Jets' front 7 like McCoy and Marshawn Lynch and Jalen Richard and Cordero Patterson have, and Mike Tolbert. So I don't think anything's going to change, on that front. Maybe playing at home will make it a bit easier on New York's defense to communicate. But yeah, I expect Miami to run it a lot, and I think that they're going to keep Cutler out of those, low leverage situations where he's, he has his potential to turn the ball over, goes up significantly, especially if he's, beyond the sticks. All right, let's wrap up here with first our high-flying Jets to watch. Max, why don't you give us a guy to watch Sunday against the Dolphins?
See, if I really wanted to steal Adam's answer, I would go with Lachlan Edwards.
Yeah, I was thinking that right now.
I wouldn't dare do that to you.
That's fine.
No. I'll let you have the punter.
I wasn't going to take the punter.
I don't believe that for a second.
Take the punter.
I'm going to go, let's see. I'm going to go Austin Seferian-Jenkins. It's his first game back.
Good one.
He was on 2-game suspension. He's coming back. It's his first game. The tight end unit, was bad to begin with. Then it got worse with the suspension, and then it got even worse when the replacements were injured. So now at least, you get a guy a couple weeks off and high expectations for him. I should say high being scaled relative to the Jets offense. But here's a guy who could, be the most successful Jets tight end in the last couple of years. So we'll see if he does it. I would look out for him.
Adam, who's your high-flying Jet?
He's taking the punter.
No, I'm going to say Elijah McGuire, Max, your favorite player.
There you go.
Yeah, there I go. I'm curious to see if McGuire's workload is going to go up in week 3 after it went up in week 2. I want to see if the Jets really want to develop a 3-man committee in the backfield and and Powell sort of loses, fantasy value and sort of relevance if he's only getting 6 touches a game. But if I don't know, if they believe in McGuire and they want to give him more touches, I'm interested to see how that goes. We'll go with McGuire there because the Dolphins' running defense isn't exactly the scariest in the world. I bet McGuire might be able to pull off some plays.
I'm sending out an Amber Alert for Leonard Williams.
There you go.
If you see Leonard Williams Sunday afternoon, please reach out to me on Twitter at RealMattBarbado and at New York Jet Fuel. It is time for Leonard Williams to emerge. He has not been good this year. I don't care what the Pro Football Focus metrics say. He has not been up to par for a third-year player you're expecting to, reach new heights. Sheldon Richardson's gone. That excuse is gone. I don't know what's going on with Mo Wilkerson. The outside linebackers have been bad for a while. The excuses are running out for me. It's time for Leonard Williams to get a sack. I think he will get one this week. I think it's easier to rush the passer in general at home when you have the crowd on your side. A little bit easier to communicate in your confines. So I say Leonard Williams is my high-flying Jet, and I think he does get a sack, and I think he shuts me up. Will it be enough to win, though? I'm not so sure. And that takes us to our predictions. We will let Mr. Zalonka lead it off. Who you got?
I've got Miami by the score of 28-13. I'm going to say the Jets probably get 3 scoring drives, but 2 of them falter short, and Chandler Catanzaro continues to prove me wrong by making all of his field goals. And I feel the Jets will probably get into the end zone either in the fourth quarter when it won't matter or, somewhere along the way, just because they're not facing, Khalil Mack this week and they're not facing a pretty good Bills defense. They'll probably be all right with points. I don't feel confident enough to go higher than 13. And 28 for the Dolphins.
I am going to give you my prediction, but first, I want to ask a trivia question.
Oh.
Hijacking the podcast.
Divisional game, home opener. Let's try something new.
Okay.
So clearly, the Jets and Dolphins, they play, twice every year. So the answer will be a 2-year span. But when was the last time? So the Dolphins have won the last 2 games. They swept last year, going for a 3rd straight win. When was the last time the Dolphins won 3 straight against the Jets?
Ooh. I'll say sometime in the early 2000s, like 2001, 2002-ish.
Adam?
I'll go 2005.
All right. Wow, you're actually making the Jets look pretty good. It was actually 2008 and 9. It was the first game of that 3-game losing streak was the Brett Favre second to last game of the season. Jets needing some sort of win to get back into playoff talk. Dolphins won 24-17. And then, believe it or not, even though the Jets made the AFC Championship under Mark Sanchez in his rookie year, 2 of their, I believe, 7 losses that year came at the hands of the Miami Dolphins. Granted, they lost those games by a combined 9 points, but still, Sanchez not so great against Miami, at least in that rookie year. So, in the honor of Mr. Mark Sanchez and the New York Jets, I am going to say the Jets lose by 6. I think, that's his old number. I think the Jets I missed the Sanchez. I think the Jets keep it close, actually. I think home opener. I think the Dolphins, this is only their 2nd game, so the Jets have an extra week of work under their belts. I don't think the Dolphins looked great against the Chargers. They had to shake off that early game rust again. They had essentially a bye week in week 1. So, and also Jay Cutler still getting acclimated to the offense and to the NFL game, which he wasn't a part of for a little bit. So I think the Jets keep it close. I think the defense does better. I think the Dolphins' passing game hurts the Jets. And I think ultimately Miami comes out on top with a 20-14 win.
Yeah, I do think the game stays close. It's the road opener for any team is typically pretty difficult. I don't know how rabid of an environment MetLife Stadium will be on Sunday, but it is a road game. The Jets do have the home field advantage of getting to sleep in their beds and have a quick commute to the stadium. So that is an advantage. Having said that, I do think the Dolphins win, and I think this is going to be relatively low scoring because I think the Dolphins are just going to say, let's keep it on the ground. The only way we can lose this game is if Cutler screws up. I don't think he's throwing 33 times in this game. I would say it's more around 20, 25 max. I think you're going to see Ajayi carry the ball 28 times at least, like you did against the Chargers in Week 1, and I think he's gonna have potential to run for 200 yards in this game. I really do. He's broken out before to those levels, so I could totally see a massive performance coming from Jay Ajayi, and I think he carries the Dolphins to a 20. We'll say I like 20-14. I'll bump it up a little bit closer. I'll say 22-16.
So, Matt, I got one more fun fact for you, and it's history. History sides with the Miami Dolphins, at least recent history.
Oh, yeah, there's a weird road stat in this series, isn't there?
4 of the last 5 games between these two teams at MetLife Stadium, the visitors, the Miami Dolphins, have won.
Yeah, I do remember. I think we cited that on last year's show when we were talking about the Jets on the road, or maybe the Dolphins on the road. But yeah, I do remember that because it's a wacky road trend with this series, and that the road teams won a vast majority of the games played lately. So I think that trend sticks. But I really do think the Jets are going to keep this close, and I don't think Miami's defense is anything spectacular either. I know they held Los Angeles, I should say, 14 carries, 44 yards rushing. So maybe the Jets have a hard time running the ball. But again, I just don't think Miami's secondary is anything formidable. If anything, it's probably on par with Oakland's. So Josh McCown could do okay in his, MetLife Stadium debut with the Jets. But again, I just think I think that the Dolphins will ground and pound this one away, and they'll own the clock, they'll own time of possession, and I think they grind out a victory on the road, which is, or I'm sorry, I totally messed up. The Dolphins were on the road in their first game, so my apologies there. So I guess playing at MetLife Stadium won't be that difficult. It's still a road game. It's the Jets' home opener, and I think that is a factor. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, any closing thoughts before we head out on this Tuesday evening?
I wish I had more historical facts for you, but
I wish I knew the Dolphins played a game on the road when I was staring right at the box score from last week.
Max just wants to stretch the podcast out to an even hour.
Why not? Hey, well, we will not stretch the podcast out to an even hour, but we will be back next week to discuss this game and preview Week 4. We want to thank you very much for listening to the Jet Fuel podcast. Be sure to follow the site on Twitter at New York Jet Fuel. Be sure to follow Max Marcilla at mmarcilla98. Follow Adam Zalonka at Adam_Zalonka. And follow me, Matt Barbado, at Real Matt Barbado. We'll have plenty of content to come this week, previewing and getting you ready for the first AFC East battle of the season for the Jets. And until then, we will talk to you real soon. And this has been the Jet Fuel Podcast.